Did you hear the episode where we went to a game with him and he stood up and clapped the entire time and yelled? And he's like a very chill guy. He doesn't get too excited very often. I was like shaking mad.
Speaking of Keith, the one thing I've always loved about Keith is like, he's the most competitive dude I know, maybe. But if your college football team's playing his on a game, he'll get excited, but he never like rubs it in your face. Like he always sort of has that approach of like,
I like that.
I don't want somebody to do that to me, so I'm not going to do it to them. Because like, you have that group of friends that are like, will never let you hear the end of it. But I've always loved that about him because I wouldn't expect him to be that way because he's so like...
He gives me more of a like surfer guy vibe.
Yeah, that's the conundrum with him, is this paradox of the chill surfer dude and the guy I've seen throw his phone against a wall and explode when the Gators lose a game.
We're going to have to get to that, but do you remember meeting me here at the front desk?
Yeah.
My memory is that I was a little excited.
Yeah. Well, it was great. It was great to come in and not be looked at as like, who are these weirdos?
Were you doing the Trevor Bauer interview that day? Or was it just you and Keith?
It was just me and Keith. Yeah, I got a hold of Ron through like old connections, and he was down, and then he was like, Kennedy Marshall. I was like, yeah, let's do it there.
So that was your first time meeting Ron?
So I've got the greatest, if you want to hear the Ron Shelton story.
Yes. Well, listeners, we're back. And today we don't have Allie, but we're replacing her with another Parker, my friend Zack over here, who we also met here and through Ron, which will be our most recent episode. So they'll be very familiar with Ron.
The incredible Ron Shelton. Yeah.
So let's hear it.
Okay. So, not to step on your intro, but I played baseball for 10 years. And so when I came out to LA...
Oh, yeah. He played baseball and now is a producer and a lot of other things that we'll get into.
We'll get into all of them. Mm-hmm. We'll go down the whole resume, the whole LinkedIn. But I came out to LA. I was a 30-year-old intern, and I was finishing up school after baseball. Mm-hmm. And I got my first job at a talent agency. It was this brand new talent agency, like literally just opened.
Okay.
And all these agents were trying to poach all their clients from their old place. And so it's literally my first day. I'm the head of the mailroom, of all things. But, we have to wear a suit and tie, like everybody. And I'm 10 years older than the other, like, assistants. But I'm walking through, it's sort of chaotic. It feels very like entourage-y.
Yeah.
Like there's like this excitement, and then you realize it's all BS. But I don't get starstruck at all. But I walk down the hallway, and in the waiting room I see this dude like hanging out with a baseball cap on, like down low. And I don't even know how I knew, but I was like, that's Ron Shelton. And so I stopped in the hallway, and I was like, obviously the mailroom guy is not supposed to go talk to the talent. And I was like, I don't think they'll fire me on my first day. Mm-hmm. So I walk up to Ron, and I'm like, Mr. Shelton. And, he stands, the gentleman takes his hat off, and I introduce myself, and I'm like, just so you know, I'm a huge fan, Bull Durham. And he's like, thank you. And I was like, but it means a lot more to me because I played in that league and I played at those stadiums. And he
must have loved that.
Yeah. But also I realized after a few seconds is he thought I was an agent. Like, why wouldn't he think I was an agent?
Yeah.
Way older than everybody. And so, I thank him and just, I was so excited. I was like floating. Go back to the mailroom. Somebody calls and they're like, hey, my printer's busted. So I go to this little corral. I'm helping this assistant with her printer, and I hear, who's Zach? Who's Zach? And I'm like, oh no, I'm going to get fired. And somebody's yelling, going to all the little, cubbies, like, who's Zach?
I'm literally picturing like Ari Gold running around searching for
That's exactly what it was. And I'm like tucked down by this printer, and she comes around and she's like, who is Zack? And I raised my hand, and she was like, oh, thank God. She's like, get over here. Ron wants you in his meeting. And so I'm like, okay. So they bring me into the big conference room. Ron's there with all the big agents, the head of the company. And I walk in, and Ron's like, oh, there he is. He's like, tell me about your career. Tell me about baseball. And so I sit there and talk for like 15 minutes.
Oh, my gosh.
And all the stories, all the agents are like, oh, laugh. Like, that's our guy.
Pretending.
That's our guy.
That you're really close.
Yeah. And then afterwards, Ron leaves, and they all one by one come into the mailroom, and they're like, who the hell are you?
Wow.
And so it was kind of this cool.
What a day.
Literally the first day of a job. And I was like, this is meant to be. Like, I'm here in Hollywood, Ron Shelton. And then we've stayed in touch, and like, we text every now and then. I mean, not on the daily, but I'll reach out every now and then, and he texts me back, and it's always like, this is incredible.
Wow.
Ron Shelton.
That must have been one of those moments where, like, you had just left a minor league career, making a new transition, and just one of those moments that made you feel like, all right, I'm on the right path.
Yeah. It's one of those serendipitous moments, especially in Hollywood, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you don't get paid enough when you first start out. You don't get really any respect. So it's these little
similar
moments.
To baseball, right?
Huh?
A little similar to baseball.
Yeah. No, the similarities are crazy. The way both industries leverage your dreams against you. Because it's like, oh, you don't want this job? There's people out the door wanting your job. And so it can get a little frustrating, but like the currency of Hollywood when you first get here are moments like that.
Yeah.
It's like you read a script and you pitch it to your boss, and your boss is like, this is stupid, get out of here. And then like a year later, it's on the blacklist, or it gets made into a movie. And it's like those little victories like keep you going until you get enough of those to really kind of believe in yourself enough to take a big chance.
I'm really understanding how similar it is to baseball after I just finished the Kershaw book.
Yeah.
Did you?
I haven't yet. I haven't finished it yet. But
you started it?
Yeah.
And did you read Ron's book?
Oh, yeah. Like in a day.
Okay, me too. Well, I
crushed that
I'm an
book.
Audible gal.
Okay.
So I re-listened to his book before we did the interview with him last week. And so everything you're saying is like just so similar to what I listened to from the Kershaw book. And it's funny that you mentioned going up to him, because Adam knows this. When we talked to Ron last week, he ends his book with not going up to Mickey Mantle.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I said, if there is ever a moment that I will leave with having a regret, I will always do it. So I'll always go up to someone or do something that is really nerve-wracking, but I know that I'll feel good about it afterwards. And he and Allie were like, nope, I'll never do that. So
unless you're crazy, like if you have self-awareness like you and I do,
yes,
then go up and be respectful. But if you're like a
time
lunatic,
and place,
like if you don't have any self-awareness, you just lay low. But yeah, like why not?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I remember you and Keith coming in, and you're like two young guys, and I hear something about baseball, and obviously my ears perk up when I hear that.
I think literally they popped up.
I just remember being so excited and waiting for the interview to be over so I could talk to you guys and just figure out what you were doing.
Yeah. I vividly remember me and Keith were talking about as we walked away, like, oh, she seemed to know her stuff. Like she was like fangirling out in like a great way because you weren't.
Well, it's very interesting, this Talk Dodgers to Me podcast and how it came about, because even then I just wanted people to talk baseball with.
Yeah, for sure. And to be honest, it's tough these days. There's a lot going on and not everybody wants to talk baseball. Even baseball fans are just more disconnected than I've ever kind of remembered. Really? Yeah.
Well, I'm the only Dodger fan in my family, and that's obviously because I moved here. Yeah. And now it's been almost 12 years. And so
you're part of the Dodger family officially.
Pretty much.
And it's been an amazing 10 years.
It really has. I chose the right 10 years
really
to come.
Yeah. It hasn't always ended the way we've wanted, but It's been fun.
But none of my family, like, yes, I talk baseball with them, but I want to talk about the Dodgers. And as I've talked about it in a bunch of the episodes prior, I would see people wearing a Dodger shirt, Dodger hat, and go up and talk to them because that's who I am. And they wouldn't really know anything. They would just be wearing the hat. And so I'd get a little, bummed about that. So that's why we're here.
Yeah. Force people to talk with you by getting them on your podcast.
Or people that actually like to talk about baseball.
Yeah. Have the people come to you. I think you're doing the right thing.
Where did baseball start for you? Like, when did it come into your life?
I mean, as long as I can remember, it was baseball. But funny Dodgers story. I grew up in rural East Texas. Mm-hmm. In the 80s when we didn't have all this stuff. I hate it when people talk about that. Like, we didn't have cell phones, but, we didn't have anything. Okay. And back in the 80s, if you got a subscription to Sports Illustrated, like a yearly one, they would send you like a football phone or videos. And
that's fun.
Oh, yeah. It was amazing. And so just so happens that the year we got it, it was like the best of the Dodgers. And so it was like this hour-long tape, the history of the Dodgers and all the championships and stuff. And I just watched that thing over and over and over and over again. So I've been a Dodgers fan for like kind of ever.
Wow.
Like, people always say like, oh, you come to LA. And I'm like, actually, I've been a Dodgers fan from the get because of Sports Illustrated.
So you didn't gravitate towards any of the Texas teams?
I mean, it was hard not to love Nolan Ryan. Like he kind of runs Texas. Mm-hmm. But there was always the allure of the Dodgers. Like even I think as a kid, it's not like I knew every active player, but when I thought of the Dodgers, it was like, Hollywood, palm trees. Like,
yes.
And I still feel that way. Every time I walk into Dodger Stadium, it's like there's this magic to it. Like, there's some things they need to fix with the stadium.
Have you been this year?
Yeah. Been a couple times. I went to the day game last week and by myself, and just like I love sneaking over there by myself.
Where do you
just
sit?
Exploring. I always start at the top middle. I'll watch a couple innings, watching the pitchers from above, and then I'll sneak down and try to get like a third base, first base.
That's kind of like what I do.
But if Kershaw's pitching, I'm spending as much money as I can to get as close as possible.
I really could talk to you for this entire hour about Kershaw because I know that you love him. And now after listening to the book, I want to just know everything about him possible.
Yeah.
And I'm even more of a fan of him now, even though he says he's not even going to read the book.
I mean,
but he participated.
So Kershaw, right?
It is so Kershaw.
And I love that he's like, he knows himself so well and he's so comfortable in his own skin that he's like, I am who I am. Mm-hmm. I showed that guy who I am. I don't need to read that.
Have you met him?
I've met him once. It was
gosh.
It was in Dallas at one of his charity events, and I got a photo with him, and he's just doing photos, and I'm like glowing. I'm like 6 years, I don't know how much older I am than him, but I'm just like completely fanning out. But yeah, I mean, the last 2 years probably, I get really heated up talking about him, and I don't want to say emotional, but I feel like every game he pitches from now on might be his last game.
I know.
So it's like, I'm going to watch every one of them, and I'm not there to eat hot dogs and drink beer with friends. Like, I want to watch the greatness.
Well, even last season, he was incredible.
Yeah.
And after I listened to the book, I went on a YouTube, Clayton Kershaw, enter everything, watched it all. All I wanted to watch over and over again was his face when they won the World Series.
Yeah. And
just like that sense of relief on him. I'm hoping they win another one this year. For him. I also hope that everyone in that dugout appreciates him and who he is and his legacy.
Everybody
How
who
could
works
he
for the
ever
Dodgers,
go to another
every
team?
fan,
How?
So that
he couldn't.
The idea of seeing him. Okay, so here's what I think. I think there's a chance that we might have lost him to the Rangers at some point. But I think when they won it in 2020, right?
Who, the Dodgers?
The Dodgers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that year. Because of because of COVID, they played in Dallas. They played all those games in Dallas.
Yep.
So he got to win it in Dallas.
That's true, and all his friends and family were there.
So I hope that sort of satiated his desire to be in Texas. That's what I'm hoping. But
well, what I gathered from the book, it seems like he really was thinking about it. More than I wished that he was. A pit in my stomach. Because he's such a family guy.
Yeah, for sure.
However, let's go back to your career.
Okay.
I don't know how it all works. So tell me how you got drafted by the Colorado Rockies, right?
Yeah.
And you're also a left-handed pitcher.
I am. So, yeah.
So he was your guy, obviously, but
well,
he came after you.
But he came after me. So I was like in AA when he got drafted. But it was like maybe the second year watching him pitch. I was still pitching, but just watching the way he went about his business, I was like, this kid's special. Like he's bound to do great things. But yeah, pretty simple trajectory. High school, and then I was drafted out of high school by the Braves.
Oh, okay.
And back then, the draft had something called a draft and follow. Mm-hmm. So it was a team could draft you and not sign you, but they would retain your rights until the day before the next draft. So it was sort of like put a stamp on you and kind of keep you in their back pocket. So I did that 1 year at junior college, and they offered me something, not very much. And I had a full ride going to LSU the next year. So I went back in the draft, and then the Rockies got me. And then that was a draft and follow, which I was really bummed about. But then I had a really, really good sophomore year. So I signed with them right before the next draft. And then I did a couple months in rookie ball, and then I was in A ball for a year, high for a year, and then a couple years in AA, and then the back half is sort of a blur. But yeah, it ended up being 10 years.
Wow.
With the Rockies, some with the Rangers, a little bit of indie ball, played a bunch in Mexico, Taiwan.
Oh my gosh.
Like, it was a really amazing fever dream when I think back on it now.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
10 years.
I will say, and this is advice to anybody who's listening who has kids and wants any advice. The best thing that ever happened to me in terms of coming up and getting ready to play pro ball was I was never the best on my team. I was always chasing somebody in front of me, and it kept me grinding and getting better. And so when I talk to dads or moms who want advice, it's like, get your kid in a situation where he's got to compete against other teams, but also his teammates, because it's very rare to have like the Kershaws of the world who, when they're the best, they still find a way to like chase something. Kobe had that, Jordan had that.
Yep.
But I was always better when somebody was counting me out, or I was behind somebody that I thought was better than me.
Ooh, playing angry. We've been talking about that a lot.
Yeah. The chip on your shoulder, you need that.
I've said that I feel the Dodgers lack a certain fire, especially in the postseason. And they're just missing some sort of edge that a lot of teams have. And yeah, maybe it's because they win so many games and then they have the break and then they come back and they don't have the fire like a team that just beat out another team after a 7-game series. So playing angry has been a theme.
I was hoping we get into this.
Really?
Because that's been the Achilles heel, is they've been so good during the regular season for so long that going into the playoffs, they haven't played a meaningful game sometimes in like 60 days.
Yes.
And it's always about the hot team. Mm-hmm. It's whoever's the hottest going into the playoffs.
The Diamondbacks last year.
For sure.
Who would have thought?
It's unbelievable.
Then they crushed us.
But
I was at that game.
No.
I was at the Kershaw game.
I am so
Zach,
sorry.
I watched him in the outfield warm up in awe, wearing my Kershaw jersey, and then I sat and listened to other fans badmouth him and like literally almost fight them because I was
Did you
so
cry?
angry. I was close to it.
Me
I
too.
just felt heartbroken for him.
Yeah.
I really felt heartbroken for him.
And the thing that people don't understand, or I don't think they understand enough, is that dude's shoulder was barely hanging on. He was gutting it out and grinding.
And he wouldn't
that whole
let
summer.
Dave Roberts or
No.
the front office tell anybody that he was injured.
Yeah.
He's like, just tell them that I suck.
Yeah.
He doesn't he doesn't want to give himself any excuses.
For sure.
Which I think he is very stubborn. And I almost wonder, like, 10 years from now, how he will reflect back on his career and how he handled things, like admitting that he needed shoulder surgery during that outing. Only because it, to me, like, I don't want people hating on him. I want them to know the truth behind it. I don't want them to think he sucked. Although I did blame it on, I went to that game with my ex-boyfriend and I felt like I shouldn't. So I said, Kershaw, I'll take the blame for that one.
Yeah, that needs to be an addendum to the book. Is that was your fault. You'll take
I'm
those
really
stats on your
sorry
ERA.
about that.
That was...
And then I
be
went to
honest,
the Bobby
that's-
Miller start too and thought that was going to be better.
Did you take him? No. Okay, well, I think... I will get fired up with people when because it's always Kershaw, like, yeah, but he sucks in the playoffs. But
I hate it. How come no one talks about when he had 1 day of rest, went and closed out for Kenley Jansen? I forget what year that was.
So, okay.
No one talks about that.
So I haven't finished the book yet, but
Sorry.
I was listening to a podcast.
You knew that happened.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is the author was talking to somebody on a podcast, and he said that when he asked Mattingly and Torrey or whatever, in those playoff games, when they kept putting Kershaw in, they said, what did he say? He said, I'd rather have a tired Kershaw than anybody else. And I love that, but at the same time, you're setting him up for failure. Like, he was the only horse for all of those years. And so he didn't just go out and pitch bad every game, but like, he was coming out of the pen. He was closing games. He was coming out on short rest. And it's like, it's just, I hope at some point somebody goes in and does like advanced stats and can take out like, well, this one game cost him like a run and a half on his stats. And to be honest, they're not even that bad. His playoff ERA is 4.5, which is a quality start. 6 innings, 3 runs.
Is that what it is now after last season? Or
I think so. We'll have to check. We'll have to.
Adam can fact check.
I'll take care of it.
Adam's going to fact check this for us. But yeah, that bothers me. It bothers any Dodgers fan, but I just think we didn't have good team. Like, we didn't have good staffs back then. Like, we didn't have people that we really trusted.
I have a feeling that, like Derek Jeter or a Kobe Bryant that had such storybook ending last games, I think that he's going to have one. I really, really do.
Yeah.
I think he's going to come in and shut it down and shut everyone down and walk off really happy with a smile. Probably not a smile because he's not one to smile, but I believe that something good will happen.
I'm praying that this shoulder surgery gets him another like 3 years.
Well, he signed a 2-year deal.
I didn't know that. Did he?
Yeah.
That's great.
Or
yeah,
1 year. I don't know how it works.
So, and here's what I wish would happen. I wish they would scratch him from this year. I wish they would be like, take the whole year off, don't rush your rehab, come back next spring and be ready to go. Because so the end of my career, my arm was not hurt, but it was garbage. Mm-hmm. Like, I'd been pitching for 20 years, essentially, from high school, college, all that. And after not picking up a baseball for 2 years in LA, I went out to a buddy's like men's league game. And I was like, man, I can't. And I started throwing, and I was throwing darts.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, yeah, just rest. Like, let your body rest. And Kershaw...
I don't think he's capable of that.
Well, they need to make him. Because I think
maybe
if
he's
he
coming
took
around to it, but
if it was surgery plus just extra time, I think he would have sort of like a Verlander.
Well,
like,
you know,
resurgence.
did you listen to that like 6-minute video of Verlander talking about his thoughts about all the pitching issues?
Yeah.
I thought he spoke so well, and what I really got from it was that he didn't start throwing really hard until he got to the majors. And now when you look at kids coming up, if you're not throwing 90 plus in high school, you're not getting noticed.
Yeah.
So like what's the solution to it? To have more longevity, but also get noticed when you're that age so that you can get drafted.
Yeah. I mean,
that's really tough.
If you're a player, you're not even thinking that, though. Like, you are literally doing anything you can to get drafted and to get to the bigs. And I remember everybody telling me in high school and college, like, you know, you got to throw hard, you got to do all these things. But when you get to pro ball, none of that matters. It's just about pitching. And that's not the case. Like, they're still wanting, like, where's your velocity? Like, it was still... They want to see that stuff. And I don't know. Like, I watched what's his name, Paul Skees, on Saturday.
How did he do? I didn't watch it.
He did well. He gave up a couple, but he's like 101, 102 as a starter, just effortlessly. And I'm like, man, that's incredible. But how long is that? Could it possibly last? Like, I have no idea. Like, I used to throw hard. I was considered somebody that threw hard, and I threw like 93, and I wouldn't even probably get drafted these days. Well,
what?
I mean, if I was training differently, I'd be throwing harder maybe, but 93 from the left side used to be like, oh my God. And now it's like, oh, you're like a soft tosser. Yeah, it's a wild world out there, and I don't know what they can do to fix it. I like Glass now. His makes the most sense to me. He talks about how slippery it is. And the difference between throwing a ball that's got some tack versus throwing like a cue ball. Like, if you were to pick up a pool ball and throw it, like, just the fact that it can slip off your fingers at the wrong time. Like, I mean, just thinking about that makes my elbow hurt.
I know.
So when they really kind of cracked down on the sticky stuff, Glass now said... he was like, the next start, it felt weird, and then the next start, he blew out his elbow and went and had Tommy John.
Well, he also said kind of what you were saying earlier. You're not going to get noticed if you're not throwing hard, so kids are going to throw hard, and they are going to do that. And getting hurt is just something that could happen by chance, but it's not going to stop anybody.
Well, who's going to protect their arm if it's not going to get them anywhere? Like, oh, you've got the best arm working at Home Depot. Like, nobody wants that.
Yeah.
So I mean, and the fact that the surgeries are so much better, and I don't know. So
now it's just going to become regular, like a normal thing that people get Tommy John surgery. They're out for a year and then they come back.
It's that now. I feel like.
Are you excited about Bueller being back?
I am. I think we got to be really patient with him. It's been 22 months.
I know.
And like the first start back, there's so much adrenaline and so much focus. But it's going to be a tough couple months for him, but I think he'll be ready by the end of the summer.
I'm excited for his intensity to be back in the clubhouse.
For sure.
I really like this group we have this year. They seem to be gelling really well.
Yeah.
I'm into it.
Here's my hope. I hope... Can we curse on this?
Yeah, sure.
I hope we get the shit kicked out of us for a while.
Okay.
So
it's okay that we just lost another series to the Padres?
Yes. I want going into the playoffs, we've lost most of the series to our division. I want that chip on our shoulder. I don't want it to be like this. I don't want it to be the last week and we're like a game or two, but like fighting for a wild card. But I do want us to struggle. Like, we gotta struggle. Like, last year I felt like the pit in my stomach going into the playoffs. Well,
it was funny last year. They weren't even really, it was kind of like a wash because everyone knew they were going to go after Shohei. They didn't really make any moves. But again, we win 100 games or more. I don't remember the exact number, but then, yeah, we just fall short. Again, I do think that Mookie has more fire than I've ever seen in him and Freddie. And I think a lot of it is because of the comments about the postseason.
Yeah.
So I like what you're saying.
So the way it's mapped out in my brain in a perfect world is we have an awful last week of August, an awful first 2 weeks of September. We even it out. We get going. And going into the playoffs, I would rather have the bullpen on point than all the guys raking. Because you know that guys can go cold. I mean, Shohei is going to be different because he's protecting them in a different way than last year. But the bullpen wins in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. We have so many guys hurt right now.
Yeah.
A lot.
I'm
excited to have them start coming back.
Well, that's what's amazing is we're doing so well with so many people hurt. But you know what? I want Kenley back. Like, getting him out of L.A. put a chip on his shoulder.
You think?
Yeah.
I think it'd be really good for Kershaw to have him back, because something that I didn't love hearing in the book was a lot of his guys are gone, and it's a whole new team.
For sure.
And I think he really misses Kenley. I would too. I thought that there was a chance that might happen.
Okay, so how do you feel about the current roster? Like, as somebody who for so long we were like the homegrown team. Like, everybody was coming out of the system. Like, when you look at it and it's like all the like.
I'll say at first I wasn't loving it because, you know, my first real heartbreak was losing Justin Turner.
Yeah.
Still stings.
Mine is Corey Seager.
I kind of knew that was going to happen.
I feel like it was going to be between Corey Seager and Bellinger, and I think we took the chance on Bellinger. Mm-hmm. And I was screaming internally, like, not about, like, Belly was great, but he was so hot and cold.
Yep.
Give me, like, I wanted Seager, and, like, he's incredible.
Adam, do you like having Belly on your team?
I do.
Do you trust him?
Yeah, I trusted him last year. He was hurt for a while this year, so he's coming back now. But he's been productive for us. He's been good in the clutch, and his two-strike approach in particular has been really, really good the last year since he signed with the Cubs. So I'm pretty happy with it. I think he's matured a little bit, and I do think he was he was banged up a little at the end with the Dodgers. But I mean, he was like under 200 last.
This would be a totally different team with Corey Seager.
Yeah. I
think I always felt like he wanted to play in Texas. So I wasn't surprised when all that happened.
I think if we would have backed up the truck, though, I think he would have stayed.
You think?
I mean, he was so clutch.
I kind of feel the same with Trey Turner.
Who? Trey Turner? Oh, yeah.
I think they didn't try that hard.
No. I think Gavin Lux was going to be the guy, right?
You think he's still the guy?
I don't know. I also heard I heard today that they were talking about they're going to trade for Bichette.
Oh, listen, if they're going all in on Mookie being the shortstop, they're going all in at Mookie being the shortstop. I wonder how you think about this, but I think Mookie's playing for more right now. I think he sees his opportunity to be a Hall of Famer and a really great player, and he lost out last year as MVP. And he needed something to separate himself, and now he's a shortstop.
He's a shortstop,
and if he becomes a Gold Glove shortstop, it's kind of undeniable for. Yeah. Although Shohei's giving him a run for his money with MVP. However, it's very early in the season.
But he'll never be in a better position to have the greatest offensive years of his career with Freddie and Shohei behind him. Like, I think he knows the opportunity that he has to have these guys and how they're going to pitch to Mookie because they don't want these guys hitting with Mookie on base. So I think he understands the value and the position he's in right now in the lineup.
This is a good question for you because you played. You know, when they talk about, this is a team sport, however, there's lots of individual goals. And a lot of the players say they're not playing for those goals. Are they really?
Give me an example of a goal. Like numbers?
Mookie. Like Mookie playing for MVP. Like when they hit like Kershaw could come up on 3,000 strikeouts in the next
they
year
are
or
playing
so.
for that. They are playing for that, but they can't frame it that way. Like that is that might be driving them on a day-to-day at bat basis, but I can't imagine a world where Mookie after the game goes and looks up the other guy's stats and it's like, oh damn, this guy went 3 for 5, his average is up more. Like if you get out of your like narrow focus and start thinking that big picture stuff, like I don't know how they do it, because I remember in the minor leagues, if we were at a stadium that had real-time stats, like you know your ERA would be like a 2.7 and you'd strike a guy out and it would be like 2.69 and you're like, oh wow, like I could get it down to. And as soon as I started thinking that, as soon as anybody started thinking that, you know, now you're at like a 3.5 because you just gave up a 4 spot.
Yeah, the mental game is
So,
strong for baseball.
I think
now I'm thinking of so many questions for you.
Yeah, I think those
Along these
guys
lines.
have to be like, yeah, I can just see them saying like, yeah, it'd be nice, but the only way I'm going to win MVP is if I'm completely locked in every at bat and then every pitch within that at bat. Like I think that's the only way to do. It's the only way to do anything. I mean,
It's
not
very
to get
true.
into like,
I feel like I love sports so much. A big reason is because I have a very similar mindset to them in everything I do. When I want to get inspired or something, I watch videos of Kobe Bryant. I watch the Dodgers highlights. I have like a couple games that I watch a lot and that pumps me up. And even listening to them talk sometimes, and I do think that they repeat the same things in media. And are they trained in that? That was one of my questions.
yeah.
So they
Well,
do
so like
have...
Ron Shelton and Bull Durham, he talks about you got to learn the cliches.
Oh, and he'll give you a couple in our episode.
That's amazing. I cannot wait.
But a lot of, especially the Dodgers, say very similar things to each other. But I do think it's something that you have to think that way, or else your mind can go all over the place. And it is such a mental game, and you have to be just so in it that like you have to trick yourself or something.
For sure.
But are they going home and watching the other games? Or how much do you think players in season follow what other players are doing?
I think there's a spectrum. I think to a certain degree everybody does. Like in the clubhouse, you know,
have the
ESPN will be
games
on. They're watching
yeah.
highlights.
Yeah.
They're, you know, guys are watching Pitching Ninja and John Boy. Like,
Oh, okay.
they're in it, you know. And
So they could watch my podcast eventually?
Oh, they're gonna be. Could.
Cool.
They will be. So.
I like that attitude.
But it's just dangerous to get in that mindset of like, oh, okay, like there's 5 games left. I'm trailing the saves lead by 2. If Kenley blows 2 saves and I like you start putting that together, it's sort of like it pisses off the baseball gods when you start thinking that way. When you start trying to bend the will of the game, then things go awry. I mean, it's like life, right?
Yep.
Like you can manifest, but you can't.
You got to trust the journey.
Yeah, true. And it's, I go back to games that I pitched in, and it's embarrassing to say, but there was maybe only 8 or 9 in my whole career where, for whatever reason, I was locked in pitch by pitch. And those were probably the 8 best games of my career.
Are you like so focused in like when you're on the mound and pitching, like do you block out everything?
Yeah, when it's good. When it's good, for sure. And, you know, I've got this like ADD brain where
Me too.
it's easy for my head to go different places. And I wasn't on, it's funny. We had a mental skills coach with the Rockies who was like, hey, you should go get checked for ADD. And I was always like, no, I'm good. I don't know what I was thinking. But yeah, I mean, you know, you take the mound and the song would be playing and you'd be kind of listening to it, and you might be thinking like, all right, like I want to get 5 innings 5 innings, no runs today. And just that sort of thinking of what could be, as opposed to like, the only thing that matters right now is the first pitch of the game. And then whatever happens, the only thing that matters is the second pitch. And then you look up and you've thrown 100 pitches and it's like the 8th inning and you're dominating. But I think it's hard to do. And if I could go back and just give myself any advice, it would be just try as hard as you can to make every pitch the best pitch of your life, instead of trying to have a good season or trying to have a good week or trying to have a good game. Just try to have a good pitch right in this moment. And it's the same advice I would give somebody.
Be more in the moment.
For sure. And not sort of in like a meditative, yogi new age way, but like literally pretend this is the most important pitch of your life and execute it. And then whatever happens, you just go on to the next thing. And it's really the advice I give anybody in any profession now. It's like, you want to write a script? Like, you want to write a script, right? Okay, what's the first step? And they're like, write the first act. And it's like, no. Like, write the first word and then write the second word. And it sounds silly, but if you can break it down into those chunks, I think you look up and you have a script, or you have a business, or you have a podcast.
Yeah, that's very true.
I think the best people in all of athletics, they're thinking pitch by pitch. Like, I mean, you can almost see it like in Kershaw's mind, where it's like, this is the biggest pitch of my life. Every pitch.
I don't think I've ever seen anyone more locked in than he is when he pitches. And that's why he's just mesmerizing to watch. But two things actually just came to mind when you were saying that. One, Ron told me something one day, and I've never forgotten it. He wakes up every morning and he writes, but he doesn't wake up and say, I'm going to write this amount of pages this day. He gives himself just like, I'm going to write for an hour. If I have one word, great. If I have 5 pages, great. And he leaves it at that.
Yeah.
And whatever happens that day, that's what happens that day. And I really liked that way. I have to, for myself, kind of fix how I'm going to think about things in order for me to set myself up for success.
Yeah.
And also the second thing I was thinking of was, when we talk about baseball and pitching and how hard it is and the pressure, when you're up there, like, are you having fun?
It's a great question. Sometimes. I mean, the fun comes in, I don't want to say the fun comes in success, because I think that's like a bad lesson to try to pass along.
Yeah.
But I think being able to stop in those moments and realizing what you're doing, even if it's just having a good inning and walking off the field and taking in that moment of people cheering or you feeling really good about what you did. But I bring this up sometimes with players, pitchers especially, it's the most unique experience that I don't know where else it sort of translates. But leading up, I was a starter, so leading up to a game, like as soon as you wake up, like you're just amped, you've got the engines are going, you want it to be 7:05 so bad, and you get close and you get loose and you're warming up and you're just like, get me on the mound. Anthem will take forever. Did you have
a routine like Kershaw does, like minute to minute?
I tried, but it's really hard in the minor leagues because everything's so chaotic. So I was always really aware of having a routine, but not letting it cross over into superstition, because so many things are out of your control in life in general. But in the minor leagues, like the bus might, break down. You might be in a city where you can't. I used to always go watch movies the day before start, but we were literally in towns where they didn't have a theater. So it's like if I didn't see a movie that day and I walked to the park and was like, well, I'm going to suck because I didn't see a movie. But but the strangest thing about pitching as a starter was all I wanted to do was toe the rubber. Like, get on the mound, let's go. And as soon as you toe the rubber, all you want to do is get back to the dugout. So, like, a guy comes up and you're like, first pitch ground ball, hell yeah. strike out, pop up, get me back in the dugout so my team can hit. But as soon as my butt would sit on the dugout bench, I would be like, okay, like I need to get back out there. It was this crazy thing of wanting to be there, and as soon as you're there, you want to be gone. Just because you know it's going to help the game and everything, but this push and pull of like, get me to the dugout because then I've done my job. But then it's like, okay, get me back out there so I can do my job. Like it's,
oh my gosh,
it's this weird
I'm stressed
experience.
just thinking about it.
Yeah, and it's, you know, there's times where you come in the dugout and your team puts up like a 6 spot, and you're just like, okay, guys, like that's enough.
That must give the pitcher just so much relief when their team is scoring like that.
It does.
And I do find that, like on a Kershaw day, they want to do really well for him. They want to hit.
Well, Kershaw is so laser focused, and this is turning into the Kershaw pod, which I knew it would, but he's so laser focused that like a 10-run lead or a 1-run lead or down by 1, like I don't think it matters. And you know, again, it's sort of embarrassing to admit, but I wanted it like give me a 3-run lead. If it got to the point where like 5 or 6 runs, like it would sort of get me in that mindset of like, okay, now you just have to manage. Just manage the game.
So you didn't want to cross over to that.
It almost goes back to the thing of not being the best on the team. Mm-hmm. Like if it's a close game, then I have something that's like locking me in. Mm-hmm. If we're up by 8, then I wouldn't lose the game, but then I end up giving like 3 or 4 runs, and you're like,
well, you knew, I guess, yourself very well to know when you played well or how you played well.
Well, especially now. I don't know if I was as enlightened when I was playing, but looking back, it's like, oh yeah, like I shouldn't have been thinking that, or, you know, I just think we know a lot more now. And I think there's just so much information for players now that I think I probably, I don't know, maybe it's just the like, if I knew then what I know now, but
isn't that
I definitely know myself now.
Though?
I know that kid now from me. Just like in 10 years, I will know so much more about where I'm at now and what I should have done. But
I think of that so much that I almost wish I could turn off that thinking a little bit. Like even when doing this podcast, I can't wait to see what I'm going to learn a month from now. I'm like, oh, I wonder what the thing is that I'm going to learn. What's the learning lesson for me right now? Like I'm always thinking of that.
But I truly think that is the key to not hating your life. Like as soon as you get to the point where you're not curious about learning, or you aren't excited about simple things of like, how good can I get at this? You're done for.
Yeah, that makes me feel better.
Oh, for sure. Like the idea that like in 10 years, I can't even imagine what I'm going to be doing. I can't wait to find out. But as soon as you're sort of in that rut of like, this is what I do, I know how to do it, and I'm going to do it for the rest of my life. Like that is my nightmare.
I think, yeah. Well, even just finding clarity on all of those things. I think for so long I was searching for clarity on what I was meant to do.
Well, what is your trajectory? Because I met you and you were here working, and I know what you've done since with like the cookies and the coaching and this. But like, what was that? The first 10 years of figuring yourself out.
I mean, I moved here a girl with dreams, and I didn't even know exactly what those dreams were, but I knew that there was something out there for me to find out, and I didn't think that it was around where I was. I think I just dreamed of California and Hollywood and life here and what the people were like, and that they seemed to dream big like me. And when I would talk about these things with people around me, not that they were like hating on it or anything, they just didn't think the way that I did. And the things that I was saying to them didn't make me feel good. So I felt like my people were here.
Yeah.
And I think I've always had a really good relationship with myself and really trusted who I am, trusted my gut and my intuition so much that really has been my guiding light. And I'm at my best when I'm really in tune with that. And it's like a lot of the outside noise that clouds it for me, and that comes in and out. And as things happen in life, But I've really just followed that and tried to figure out what that was with everything that I did. I went from moving here thinking, oh, maybe I want to be an actress. Maybe I want to work in the film industry in some way. But I never knew exactly what that was. So I tried that. I wrote a web series, hired a cast, shot it, then realized, I don't know if this is my thing.
Yeah.
And I worked in a lot of different places and figured out how to make rent and live my life on my own away from my family. And honestly, it wasn't until I got in a really bad relationship that was such a mirror for me that I came out and really did a whole like self-development journey and went through that. And it's funny because I hired a life coach for myself. And in our first session, she's like, I think this is what you're meant to do.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And
it's
I think sometimes when things come so naturally to you, you don't see them as special. So it takes someone really pointing it out to you for you to be like, oh, and like have that light bulb moment.
For sure.
And that was the first time that I really started thinking about it. And then a couple of days later, I was working here and I was on the phone with someone from like Spectrum or something. And all of a sudden, my coworker walks by and like does a double take and I'm talking to someone and like, oh, you wanted to work in this? Why don't you do that? Why aren't you following your dreams? And like having this life coach type session with someone. And then my coworker said something to me about it. And I'm like, okay, I think this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I kind of think there are things here and there that opened my eyes to that and that I really love talking to people and helping them. I think I always knew my purpose was to help people, but I had to figure out what exactly that meant.
Yeah.
And finding the clarity for that was definitely the journey.
Well, what I think is interesting about that is to get to that point, you had to, not to put words in your mouth, but like hit rock bottom and be in a really, like you only grow through failure, you know? And I think so many people are afraid of failure, but it's so funny you say that, the life coach, because just to take a hard turn, like this, I'm doing a bunch of stuff, producing and writing, but I'm also now a certified hypnotherapist, and I lead past life explorations like around town at like the Mindery in Malibu. And
oh my gosh!
But
that is really cool.
It is really cool, and it's so crazy. It's going back to, we're so curious of where we're going to be in 5 years. Like I never would have imagined that I'd be like leading a, you know, past life meditation class in Malibu of all places. But I was a TV executive at AMC. Mm-hmm. People came in and pitched a show about a past life therapist. And when they left, one of the producers called me and said, hey, that went great, but Mira, the therapist, said you had amazing energy and she would love to do a reading with you. And I was like, yeah, like I would love that. So I went and did a reading with her in Venice the next day. Crazy skeptical, like I'm too mentally strong for this, but wildly curious. Mm-hmm. And it changed my life forever. And wow. Like immediately I was, you know, having this experience with her, and then I'm like crying and just like an emotional release that I'd never really thought was possible. And when I came out of it, she said, your channels are wide open. You could do this. Like you could do what I do. Like you would be really good at this. Sort of the same way that your life coach was. And that always stuck with me. And then I slowly just kept researching it and then just started doing it. And it's led to this stuff now. But it's, you know, it's led to the hypnotherapy stuff where I also am working with athletes for like peak performance, like therapy. And
I was just thinking that. I'm like, wow, that would be really good with athletes, and maybe it'll all come full circle for you.
No, it's starting to come full circle, and it's just...
It's amazing when things happen like that. You know, I almost thought, like, that was too easy. I always wanted to do what I loved for a living. And I didn't know exactly what that was, but I knew that I would find it. I had no doubt I would. But it was taking a while. And I kept believing in myself that I'll figure it out. And like that just seemed too easy, that I could just sit down and talk to people and help them. That's it. Like I just had to be me.
Yeah.
That really was it. And like having that realization, it's kind of like, of course, but also really empowering.
Well, that's what this is, right?
Yeah, and I knew I wanted to use my voice. Actually, when we met, I told you I wanted to start a podcast.
Yeah. This is just, the life coaching stuff is you being you through the lens of helping people with therapy. Mm-hmm. And this is just you being you through the lens of like another passion of yours.
Exactly.
I think with anything, it's just understanding self and then being brave enough to move forward.
Yeah, I think I've surrendered to the journey.
Yeah.
At this point, and I'm more just excited to see what unfolds rather than worrying about what was going to happen, which I was in that mindset for many years. But so it's nice to be on the other side of it. Not completely there, but
sure. But in 15 years, you're going to look back and you're going to look at this time frame that you're like, it really took a while, but you're going to be like, oh, it wasn't as long as it seemed. You know, I use this example with clients a lot, where the Phil Knight book, Shoe Dog. Mm-hmm. One of the chapters, it's, you know, he ends the chapter with like, and so I started selling shoes out of my car or something. And then the next chapter starts and it's like the year is, 1984, but there's like a 6-year gap between the end of one chapter and the beginning of the other. And it's like, people forget that. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not sexy to talk about in a book or a movie, but in this world where we want everything right now, it's like
totally.
That more than half a decade, he was just in the trenches.
Well, that's why I really feel like the most important thing to me and what I want to get across more than anything in the work that I do is how important it is to be your own biggest cheerleader, to be your own best friend, because I don't know what would have happened if I didn't have that belief in myself, if I didn't trust myself this much. And I feel like in what I've learned about you and what you stand for, it does feel like you align in that way.
I fall into the trap sometimes of putting all my energy into being everybody else's cheerleader. I've gotten a lot better at it, but like fully believing in yourself, but like giving the energy to help somebody else kind of get over their hump. But then, in coaching that like you can give them the tools, but you can't make them use them. Mm-hmm. But you're talking about this belief in yourself. There's a really fine line between like belief in yourself and delusion. And I feel like I straddle that thing really well.
Me
because
too.
if you were just to tell somebody that like, okay, my goal in life is to like be a professional baseball player for 10 years, then get into producing and then, take a film to Cannes and win South by. And like people would be like, you're out of your mind. But once you've done it, it's
not
like
the people that have done it before.
Well, exactly.
Because that's how they thought.
Because it might look delusional from the outside, but when you're used to believing in yourself and things coming to fruition, I just think, man, the people I work with are so on the cusp of things. There's just like a tiny hump they can't get over. And my focus with all my stuff is just like, and it comes from my baseball days. It's like, how do you work with the voice in your head? Because forever I would go into these shame spirals of like being on the mound and, that voice saying, this guy's going to hit a bomb off you. And not only, it's like I was wasting energy fighting that voice, but I was also like getting mad at myself of like, why do you have that voice? Like, you're the only one that has that voice. And it's like, oh no. Like once you learn that everybody has that, but the best athletes, the best executives, the best creatives are the ones that like know how to combat it the most effectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, when I was going on walks and really like listening to every self-help book I possibly can during that really dark period for me, the people that I related to the most and this is going to sound delusional, Oprah.
Yeah.
Like what she was saying and her trajectory and the way that she thought, like that's what I was connecting with the most. And someone once told me I'm naively ambitious. And I
have
think
to be.
I think they meant it as a dig, but I took it as a compliment.
You have to be.
Yes.
You should take that as a compliment, because what person has ever done anything that like wasn't ambitious? Like if you're not trying to get out of your comfort zone, but you also need that naivete. Like you need to not know so much. Like you need to not know how hard it is. Like when I played, it was almost just an extension. It was like a given that I was going to go to college and then go play pro and then go to AA and go to all that stuff. But now, the further I get away from it, the more I'm sort of in awe that it actually happened. Because I'm like, my God, how does anybody, the numbers, and you see how hard it is for other people. And it's like, I'm just sort of more grateful now just because the distance shows me how tough it really is. But I always talk about people I like being around. And I think you've probably been there. You might be there now, but you've been there before. And I certainly have. But it's this intersection of arrogance and ignorance. And when these two things are colliding, that like intersection is when really like magical things take place. Because if you're too arrogant and you don't know enough, that's not healthy. And if you know too much, then it's too overwhelming to think that you can do it.
Well, I think a piece of that is the willingness to ask questions.
Yeah.
Even if you think that it might be stupid.
For sure.
And I think I've never been afraid to ask a question.
That's I think asking questions and being able to say I don't know are wildly important. If I'm around anybody that's above me, and especially in the world of like, you know, the past life regression, hypnotherapy, life coaching stuff, if somebody out there is saying they have all the answers to everything, avoid these people at all costs.
Absolutely.
Just get away from them. And people who act like their life is perfect, and it's like those people are dangerous. I truly believe.
You know, when I was listening to your episode on the Heading for Home podcast, the way that you were talking, and you did not experience this hypnosis, life-changing, new career path for yourself, I felt like you were talking like you had went to the coaching certification program that I went through, because you were asking Keith, and it's funny because it must have been like the thoughts that my coach was having while I was sitting with her and I was asking her questions. As you are, I'm interviewing you, you're asking me questions, but you were like, what tools did you have to transition from baseball? And like, you're already thinking that way.
I think it comes from, like you said, like doing the work on yourself, like doing the sad girl, sad guy walks on the beach listening to a self-help book. And it's not that, and I'm sure you're the same way, I'd be willing to guess, is it's not like you listen to a self-help book and you take down notes and you use it, but it's the relatability, you hearing somebody else talk about their struggles.
Absolutely.
And it gives you the confidence that you don't need to take all their lessons, but you go back to Oprah, and I think the coolest thing that I ever heard about Oprah is when she talks about having imposter syndrome. Because it's like, if you are having imposter syndrome of any kind, you should be happy. Like, you're in good company. Like, know it, like as uncomfortable as it feels to feel like an imposter, knowing that Oprah and Barack Obama and all these people have it, it's like, okay, you're doing something, right? You're getting out of your comfort zone to the point where you're thinking that. And it's knowing that everybody else is dealing with it. I think it's so much more empowering to push through it than just to think, again, going back to the thing of like, oh, that voice in my head is I'm the only one that has that. It's like, oh
well, no. That's why I like podcasts so much, because on top of all the self-help books I was listening to and still do, it was listening to other people share what they've been through and hearing their stories that really made me not feel alone in what I was going through and things like that. And that is so helpful because, and sometimes that's even more helpful and more relatable when you see someone like a celebrity or someone you think that you know, share something they've been through and you're like, oh my gosh, I can relate to them.
Yeah.
And it's really in our willingness to be vulnerable and share these things. If I could help one person and make them not feel alone, that's my purpose. And that's what I strive to do. And behind everything I do, that is my intention. And if I know that that's what I'm doing, then like that's what pushes me forward. I don't have expectations other than doing what I know I should be doing.
Yeah. I mean, there's what's the formula I said on the podcast? It's like happiness equals reality minus expectations.
I wrote it down on here.
Oh, I love
H equals R over E. Yep. Reality over expectations is happiness.
And I think I've heard it in podcasts before. It's like the key to happiness, and maybe it's in jest, but it's not wrong, where it's like the key to happiness is low expectations.
Well, I battled with that for a long time, and I still do a little bit because very often in my life, one of the things I was most told was lower your expectations. And I thought that's the worst advice you could ever give anybody, especially me, who is like glass half full, pouring over optimistic. For sure. I don't think it's lowering expectations. For me, I guess it's just not having expectations, just doing things with my heart.
Yeah.
And at least for right now, in this moment in time, that's how I have to think about it.
Yeah, and I think the way I talk about it is have your expectations, this long, the long tail goal of what you want. But all you have is the image of where you want to go, that expectation, and then right in this moment. And that the whole middle, like don't even waste your time thinking about it because it needs to unfold to get to that point. So I'm the same way. The lower expectations is interesting to me, but I reject it and I try to reframe it to the point of like, well, it's about kind of rejiggering, recalibrating the expectations and just, again, focusing, pitch by pitch, word by word, like however you want to make the analogy.
Well, back to baseball a little bit. How was your transition after leaving baseball and then jumping right into becoming an agent? or what Ron thought you were, working in the mailroom at that talent agency.
It's interesting. I had an amazing transition because when I knew baseball was wrapping up, within like 2 weeks, I got on a movie set and I was like,
oh, wow.
Like, and it was like a little indie. I mean, it was like a student film basically in Austin, but I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. So I had this huge, like 4 or 5 year adrenaline surge of getting into something new. And it took making the first movie and having that amazing run in the festivals and sort of getting to travel the world. And I came back.
Didn't you win South by?
We won South by. And it was just a wild year. We played all over the world, won a bunch of festivals, but South by was the big one. But we got to go to Cannes.
Oh my gosh.
Like all these amazing places. And after that, it was like, okay, that itch was scratched a little bit. And then I was like, oh shit, I'm not a baseball player anymore. Like it was almost like, I don't know if I've ever sat down and said, I'm retired. I think I just got distracted. And then after about 5 years, I was like, oh wow, like this is tougher than I thought. Like I thought I had just like gotten over it. I moved on. And then you realize like, oh no, you have to reckon with this. Like,
were you following baseball at that time? Like in those 5 years?
Literally the only thing that kept me following was Kershaw.
Wow.
I didn't watch Baseball Tonight or SportsCenter or whatever. I just was always keeping track of the Dodgers through Kershaw. Like I was keeping track of them, but I wasn't like watching every game, but I always watched Kershaw. But I think I realized like, oh yeah, I've tuned out a little bit, especially when like friends and teammates were still playing. And I was like, man, that's like, that guy's wasn't better than me. But I think, the podcast with Keith really helped come to terms with that and just process the identity of it all. Like, I think, we identify so much when we're young with whatever we want to be, right? Mm-hmm. And you sort of have this list of, I want to be, and it usually goes like baseball player, soccer player, football maybe, and then astronaut, fireman. And as you come of age, puberty, high school, college, you start marking off all these expectations, right? And then you finally get to something that's a good fit for you, accountant, lawyer, whatever it is. But when the first thing you ever want to do is be a baseball player, and you don't mark that off until you're 30, that's like a kind of a dangerous place to be if you're not careful about how to handle the way you see yourself. Because baseball, more than most sports, is the first thing that kids start to play. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I remember from the get-go, people would introduce me. Oh, this is little Zach. He's our baseball player. And it just gets ingrained in your head. And then you go out into the real world and it's like, oh, I can't tell people I'm a baseball player anymore. And it's just hard to wrap your brain around, especially when you've done it till you're like 30. I mean, so
yeah,
and I think
starting a new chapter.
There was some viral stuff going around about Shaq, where like when Shaq retired, like he was like, I wasn't the guy anymore, and I didn't know how to handle it. It's like everybody kind of goes through that. And like Kobe, like what did Kobe do? Kobe retired and like went and won an Oscar. Like he had to jump right into something else. Like
he had already been thinking about it.
For sure. But
and I think that
another thing.
Also needs to be more ingrained in professional athletes to go to school, to do things,
sure.
to set themselves up for success after they're done playing their sport. I think a part of me that is why I chose to move to LA, I didn't like the societal norms. I didn't like everybody in my family telling me, oh, you're going to be this.
Yeah.
I didn't like that at all, and I didn't understand why everybody thought that way. Like, I'm like, open your eyes. Like, there's so much more out there. Even like since starting this podcast, there's so many jobs in the world of baseball that no one knows about. Like, I believe in doing something that you love. It can be a realistic thing. It doesn't have to be a professional athlete or something like that. But do something that brings you some joy or makes you happy. I believe that's possible.
Yeah. No,
I believe that if you're unhappy in your situation, whatever it is possible to become happy. But everything always boils down to you. We are the change.
For sure. In
whatever we do.
Well, my whole process of when I work with clients, it's all based from things I've learned in baseball and then in the film industry. And it's all framed around like the hero's journey. And it's like the hero is the one in the story that has to change. So it's like if you are the hero in your life, like you have to go through the shit and change. You can't manipulate the world around you to fit what you want. You have to change yourself. And it's literally the tale as old as time, where it's like the hero, the protagonist gets out of his comfort zone, goes on a journey, comes back changed. Yep. And I think you're right. Like I think I hate to be really highfalutin about it and just be like, anybody can have their dreams. And it's like some people are in really tough situations, but there are always micro decisions that you can make that slowly get you to a better place or to where you want to go.
Yeah.
When I work with people, it's like if we put together a new routine, a new system for you, the first 90 days are going to be great. But after the first 90 days, it's not sex anymore. And it's maintenance now, right? Kind of going to the gym and getting in shape is fun. And it can be hard, but it's fun. But once you get in shape and then it's like, okay, now it's just maintenance.
Yep.
Now you got to do all this stuff, but you're not seeing the results immediately. And it's getting people over that first hump. But then another analogy I make is like when a space shuttle takes off, right? It's like that's exciting and it gets going up quick, but then it's like stabilizing that thing. And then once it's stable, it's like, how do you just keep it on the trajectory of where you want to go? Because the launch is exciting, but it's like the podcast, like how many episodes, like
This is number 8.
like that's
8 weeks.
That's amazing. Like with our podcast, the first 20 were just like, holy shit, we did 20. And then it's like sort of, okay, now we're just grinding. Now we have to just keep scheduling. And not that we didn't love it, but it was like that sort of like, oh my God, we're doing a podcast. Then it turns into like, okay, we're doing a podcast. Mm-hmm. We got to keep it up. Mm-hmm. And it's just, it's that, man. It's like anybody can do anything for 90 days, but it's like, can you continue it and stick to something?
So what you're doing now, you're leading classes. Are you all, and you're working with people one-on-one?
Yeah, it's the past life regression stuff it's sort of an entry. It's like an entry tool for me where a lot of people have like a rumbling. They're not happy. They don't know exactly why. And what I found for me was the past life regression really brought some stuff to the surface that like made me face it, and had so much like one-to-one comparisons to what I was dealing with. And
Wow.
it's such an amazing way to tap into our unconscious, to kind of like,
I'm very intrigued.
it's incredible. Like I think you would love it. And it's sort of the entry point to get people to understand that like, oh, we can do some amazing work. Like I show you this kind of, the entry thing, and then we get in, we talk about what came up. And then I have this sort of like coaching regimen, like recalibration coaching is what I've branded it. And it's just about finding the narrator in your head, identifying and convincing you that it's not you. And it's just this Frankenstein of criticisms from family and friends and bullies and the media, and then detaching yourself from that and realizing that you can work in tandem with that voice, and getting away from trying to get rid of the voice, right? So many people are like, I got to get rid of that voice in my head. And it's like,
Wow.
you're fighting a battle you can't win. You can learn to like
Change the
coexist,
thoughts.
and you can be friends with it even, but to try to get that initial negative thought that pops into your head whenever something comes up, like that's never going to go away. You can harness it, but you can't beat it.
Wow. I bet your life experience up to this point makes you really good at this job.
I think so. Like I think
That's a really good
because
feeling.
I feel like no matter what somebody's going through, like I can relate to you.
That's how I feel.
And
truly.
and sometimes like you're anxious about giving a speech or doing a presentation at work, and I relate, but my presentation was like in front of 20,000 Taiwanese rabid fans. And so it's not that like mine was necessarily tougher, like we're all in our same different experiences, but the things I did that helped me but also made me fail, like I can help guide you through that. So it's just been like, it feels like such a hard turn career-wise, but when you really start at the beginning,
Yeah.
it's just it's not.
Well, I really
it's not the
see
hard turn
it
I
coming
think it is.
full circle for you.
Yeah.
I feel like what you're doing is exactly what athletes need. And as we kind of wrap up here, how, like, in what you're doing, what would you tell a baseball player right now to help their mental game?
I mean, the broad stroke is the doing whatever you can to focus pitch by pitch. Like that's what I tell anybody. But even somebody that, like, you can get somebody in a hypnotic state where they can visualize pitching Game 7 of the World Series to the point where they can like feel it in their hands. They can feel the anxiety in their chest. And it's like you can take people to these high leverage moments and walk them through an experience where they have their dream scenario come true. And they walk away and it's implanted in a way where you walk away from a session with the feeling like, I've done this, I can do this. Like whatever the situation is, I can do this because I've already done it, because you sort of feel it in your unconscious. Like there's been studies for years that talk about, you take athletes, or like the free throw. You might have heard about, like they take 100 people and they practice free throws for a week, another 100, and they just imagine it. They just sit and think about shooting free throws. And the people that imagine it do just like increase even more than the people that actually did it. And so there's ways that you can tap into your unconscious, have an experience that you walk away and it feels like it's ingrained in you. So when you
must be what it feels like for Steph Curry.
Yeah, but it's like, if you can't recreate the experience of giving a big presentation at work until you do it, like you can come to me and we will have that experience where you have the outcome you want. And then when you're in that meeting, you won't have the anxiety because you know you have it within you to do it. And somebody just hasn't told you that. You've literally felt it.
Wow.
Like it's really hard to explain until you've experienced it. But it's like all the past lives all the sessions I've ever done live within me as like memories. They don't feel like dreams. And it's the same when you have like a peak performance thing where it's like you walk away and you're like, oh yeah, I've hit a hole in one at the Masters, because you were in it and you were seeing it and you were feeling it, and like you could feel the adrenaline. It's a unique experience.
You know what's interesting that you say that? Starting this podcast and just as I've found more clarity and gone further in things that I've wanted to do, what it's done for me, which has been surprising, is given me a sense of calm. And I think like that kind of sounds like what you're giving someone, a sense of calm going into something that usually is anxiety ridden. So that's really cool.
It's doing what you can to take away the fear of the future by experiencing it at such a level that it takes away that anxiety. Yeah, you're spot on.
I love it.
As always.
Well, baseball players and everyone out there, your future coach,
Right,
Zack Parker.
Coach is.
I know. Hire me and Zack.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
Clayton Kershaw does have a 4.49 postseason ERA, so you were right about that.
Oh.
That's incredible.
Just wanted to wrap that up from
Yeah.
60 minutes ago.
Thanks,
What
Adam.
was that? 6 or 7 runs in the first inning? Like,
Well, because of my reputation, I should say his last postseason game, his ERA was 162.
Oh, my.
But despite that, I like Clayton. So, yeah, 4.49 is pretty good.
Yeah, you're not talking bad about him in front
I
of me.
like Clayton Kershaw. I
Ever.
like him.
yeah. It's his, he's just a product of his success. Like, he's compared against himself. It's like, how could you... Guy's got a 2 career
Well,
ERA.
that's why there's certain greats that we talk about a lot, and he will be one of them.
For sure.
Well,
And that's why I
I
want to
actually
shake every
have
Dodgers
in my
fan.
phone a list of future guests and what I want to ask them. He's number 1. And
Yeah.
I have a list of questions.
For sure. So he hasn't gotten it yet, but last summer I made this like 5-foot by 4-foot art piece. It's like this mixed media thing of Kershaw.
Uh-huh.
And, it was like 100 baseball cards, magazine articles, programs from games, and I just like put them on.
How cool.
And it's super dope. And I gave it to Keith to give to the strength coach, who's going to give it to Kershaw, and I think they're going to auction it off for his
You
charity.
should give it to him.
Well, that's what I said. But it was all in the middle of the injury stuff. So
Okay, let's get invited to the ping pong
that's what
challenge.
That's what I
And
said.
then you can give it to him there.
Yeah.
And then I can poach him for the podcast.
Yeah.
So we'll work on that. And
Or
we'll keep you updated
we can do
on how that goes.
You can get some portable lav mics and do a podcast from the ping pong where you're just walking up and you're interviewing everybody.
Adam, are you good at ping pong? We got to start practicing now.
I'll watch Balls of Fury tonight.
Well, thank you so much for coming
Okay.
and talking to me, Zack.
So
We're going to
excited
have
be
to
here.
have you back for a part 2
Please.
and 3.
We need to, we'll keep it going, and maybe we can do like a pod viewing when Kershaw comes back. We can like watch the game and
So we end each episode with saying who's a former Dodger player that we miss. We've got some of them on here, like Corey, who we mentioned.
Corey.
So who is a player that plays on another team or someone you miss?
I'm going to say two. Because Greinke was only here a year, right? I think Greinke, but going to those games when Kershaw and Greinke were like challenging each other and they were 2-3 in the Cy Young and lost out to Arrieta, that was an amazing year. But I love, like, I'm usually not a hitter guy, but like Turner, when Justin was like the guy, the clutch dude, Big Red, like.
Why did they? I really do feel like I can understand a lot of the decisions they make. That's one that really still gets me, just because of the his legacy with the Dodgers and how important he was to the city and to the team. I really wonder what their thought process was with that one. However, I'm not sure if you listened to this episode, but the way that I kind of reckon with it is I think he might want to be a manager one day, and playing for different teams and organizations might help him with that in the long run.
I would love
what do you think about
him.
that?
I would love to see him as a manager. That would be incredible.
Don't you think seeing
for sure.
other perspectives from different organizations would
sure.
help him as a future manager?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're sticking with that, guys.
Well, okay, I got one for you real quick.
Okay.
Who's your favorite current player that's not known as, like, who's your favorite newbie of the last couple years?
Miggy Rowe. Well, I didn't even realize that he was playing behind Kershaw for his no-hitter.
I didn't either. Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
He was drafted by the Dodgers. And now I think he's like the heart of the team.
Yeah.
And actually, I just listened to an interview with him. And see, I like to think I'm the Jason Hayward of the Dodgers because they call him the life coach. But I think I'm a Miggy Rowe and Jason combo.
Yeah. I like that.
But what Miggy Rowe is saying, he's kind of thinking of his position with the team right now as him becoming better for when he becomes a coach one day. So along the lines of what I was saying about Turner, because he's helping Mookie so much with the shortstop.
Yeah. I think, these guys.
Miggy Rowe is my answer.
The guys that take these roles as they get older and they start looking forward to like that next phase, even when they can still play, is pretty special. Like, I think it takes a certain type of guy to do that.
A certain type of guy without an ego.
Yeah, for sure.
Who's yours?
Man, again, a hitter. I think Freddie. I just think he plays the game right.
I love Freddie.
I'm
going to need a whole episode to talk about Freddie.
Yeah, there's something about when he went back to the Braves last year and he was really upset. Like, I really, really like my athletes being vulnerable. Dan Campbell.
I felt the same way. I thought this is what we need more of.
For sure.
And not just like the fact that he was okay with like crying in public. I felt like this is such a good leader for little kids playing the game and seeing that that's okay. Yeah. Not just a good leader to his sons, but just anyone watching.
For sure. To be sort of the guy and being able to be that open and in touch, like I'm a huge fan of that.
Reliable, consistent.
Yeah.
Great teammate, leader.
I hate saying
can
it's
anyone
a hitter,
say a bad thing about him?
Yeah, I love that about him. I think when him and Kershaw are both healthy, like, what a combo for the pitchers and the hitters. Like, it's the way
I could
to
go on a whole nother rampage right now, but
yeah.
Zach will be back for
we'll be back.
part 2 eventually.
For sure. Can't wait.
All right.
Thank you
Thanks.
for having
Bye.
me.